blessings that nothing has gone off in your bag. That means.
So, that's it.
You're all night.
No.
We do all the meetings. Every Thursday, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. town meeting. That's hours and hours and hours and hours. So I feel liberated by the spring schedule here.
11's really late.
Would the whole place do that?
The entire thing.
Every 3 months.
That's right, insane.
Yeah. Dare we say you turned it on?
I'm 100%.
We can say that. usually sneaker clad.
I don't know.
So there's,
Oh God, that was so loud.
concept that the more different types of shoes around the table describe different types of perspectives. So you want lots of different types of shoes.
Like she's a plant. Is my husband listening?
Okay. I think
Recording in
we are
progress.
set. Calling to order the March 25th, 2024 special school committee meeting. Given it is a special budget meeting, there will be no public comment tonight. We do have one item on the consent agenda to just approve some meeting minutes and two items beyond the budget review. So with that, I guess we can move right to the consent agenda. We just have approval of the March 2024 special meeting minutes. Would anyone like to further discuss that beyond the consent agenda? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Moved by Rajiv, thank you. Second?
Second.
Second by Emily, thank you. We'll do a roll call vote. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 8,
Yes.
and Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. So we can move right to our budget review item for tonight, which is teaching and learning, professional development, and student services.
So Dr. Renee McCall will present for teaching and learning and online. Casey Noe Miller, the director, assistant superintendent for student services, is online. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I will get us started tonight with a quick overview of what the Teaching and Learning Department has been working on this year. So content-specific curriculum coordinators, along with the ELL department, we are focused on the instructional core, which really thinks about the interplay and the relationship between content, teachers, and students. And we are taking a look at these three key levers of professional development, curriculum, and instruction, and thinking about how CRI, culturally responsive instruction, as well as sheltered English immersion practices and strategies are embedded throughout all of our learning experiences for all students to ensure on-ramps and to maintain high expectations for learning. This slide will look familiar to you. Dr. Nolan talked about the major changes to teaching and learning last week. So I have this here for reference. On the next slide, I will detail some of the major changes, but I wanted to leave this up here so that you can understand how these changes, though, will follow through and impact and be able to ensure that the curriculum we offer in the Newton Public Schools is standards aligned, engaging, and meaningful for all students, including students with disabilities, as well as multilingual learners. This is a slide that details some of the major changes. So we had several on the previous slide, but I wanted to bring your attention to just 4 of them. We have $3.9 million in additional funding for curricular resources this school year, where $2 million came from the city, and it was earmarked toward the elementary literacy curriculum with the purchase of a high-quality instructional materials and professional learning. So that professional learning was geared toward resources for both students and teachers to become more familiar with the particular curriculum and the rationale for why we chose that. And then we have $1 million from DESE, which is a grant for high-quality instructional materials. We will use this money by the end of June to purchase additional trade books to support the literacy program and digital and print resources. $925,000 for district-wide instructional curriculum materials. We are still in the process of determining how those funds will be used. However, some of the items that have been up for discussion is the middle school science curriculum for grades 6 through 8 with Open SciEd. We'll be purchasing that for the coming school year, and it'll be rolled out over 3 years. We have the investment in math, particularly for ST math in the K through 5 setting. And then we also have been discussing expanding Newsela, which is offered currently in the middle school, but it was funded fully in 6 through 8 in the previous year. But because of budget cuts last year, we had to scale back on that. And so we are in conversations about expanding that back up to grade 12. There are other items up for discussion, and we will be in conversations with various stakeholders to make sure that we have full coverage for K through 12, leveraging those funds. You might recall last week, Dr. Nolan talked about the EL literacy implementation. Thank you, Richie. For grades 3 through 5. Next year, we will be fully rolling that out for grades grade 5 was supposed to have rolled out this year, but due to unforeseen circumstances, it has been pushed off till next year. So again, we are in conversations about grade 5, particularly given the fact that we want to ensure that teachers' time is balanced, and we don't want to overburden them with 3 through 5 EL literacy implementation as well as social studies grade 5. So we will revisit that, but we wanted to bring that to your attention. And then another one of the major changes is related to the implementation of math and ELA benchmarking for K through 8. We currently use iReady for ELA. We are in conversations about expanding that to include math. We're also looking at some other programs as well, again, so that we can better gauge how students are doing, so that we can manage our interventions effectively, and to also strengthen our Tier 1 instruction. And then finally, we have an addition of 1 staff leader in the ELL department who will be focused on ELD development for curriculum and instruction, while at the same time, we're also going to be focused on expanding our SEI practices district-wide to again ensure that all students' needs are being addressed. This is my final slide, but here I know the print is very small, but what I wanted to outline here is to show you that for literacy 3 through 5, which is the light purple, we have the full implementation next year, 24-25. And then if you continue to go down and you see science, full implementation is for grades 6 through 8, not 3 through 5, so we don't have a conflict there. But social studies, this would need to be updated again because we were supposed to implement those units this year, but they have been postponed to next year. So we do have that conflict in grade 5 for literacy as well as social studies. And if you just continue to go down, you'll see that there is no other implementation of content in the K through 5 or 6 through 8 that overlaps. And then if you just follow that same thought process for the subsequent years, you'll see that we wanted to really ensure that you would not have that overlap. So in 25-26, you see there's a full implementation of K through 2 for science. And then if you go down a bit more, this is for middle school social studies. So I just wanted to give you a sense of how to read this timeline, just so that everyone is aware that we wanted to be sure that there is no overlap again, so that we're able to better manage teachers' time and energy. And with that, I'll leave it to questions.
Okay, thank you for that. I will open up to questions from the members.
So no one sent me any questions in advance. So I am going to remind everyone about our norms for the future so that we can have all your answers, although we're able to answer on the fly as well.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Hey, I should probably know this, but what is sheltered English immersion?
So when we have multilingual learners that are in the general ed classroom, we want to ensure, again, that they have access to grade level standards. And so sheltered English immersion strategies and practices allow for those on-ramps for students. So it could be modeling opportunities, where there's an opportunity for students to practice with manipulations, or it could be opportunities for students to engage in discourse with partners or peers, so they're making sense of what they're learning. So it's really just an effort to employ these strategies to ensure that all students have access to grade level work.
Thank you. On Ping?
Thank you. First of all, I'm curious, this $3.9 million for curriculum resources, sounds quite a lot of money. That's every year we got some money, but this year seems a little bit extraordinary.
Well, the mayor promised the $2 million, which we are grateful to have. So that was a one-time deal to purchase the elementary literacy curriculum. The $1 million we were granted from DESE based on a grant that we submitted, which was fantastic work on the part of many individuals. And then there was an additional $925,000 from the city this year for additional curriculum resources. Will it continue in subsequent years? I don't know for sure, but we certainly have it for the coming year.
Of course, no one can complain if we have a little bit more money this year. But, a lot of parents are paying a lot of attention to the all kind of curriculum, math curriculum, English curriculum, literacy curriculum. Here, I'm looking at social studies. I don't recall we had any meaningful, significant discussion about social studies curriculum. Could you say something more about on this, whether we are buying or we are talking about development of new piloted social studies science we are involved, or some company, some university, organization are involved doing that?
So you might remember Alan Ripp, our curriculum coordinator for social studies, made a presentation last year. And these are some units that were written by DESE that we piloted. There were others that were written by various folks. And so we piloted those over last year, and they were supposed to be in full implementation this year. However, we were unable to implement them this year, and that's why we're pushing them until next year.
Okay, just quickly, I was involved in the past few years, involved in the Asian history curriculum, Asian culture and history, and they're working with the state, state, how do you call state assembly? What's the term for state rep? What's the organization we call?
Legislature?
Legislature, not Congress, of course, but yeah, state house, folks in reps and senators to see if they can include that. But I told them, curriculum mostly is from Department of Education, of course, and I don't know how much role state legislature would play this role, but I hope that, social study and history would pay attention to the, minority history, and which is being outstanding topic for quite a few years in the past, especially now the students' population changed significantly, not only in urban area, but in, suburban cities, town like Newton. So I hope that you guys will, when we think about picking the curriculums, this will be in your mind, and hopefully we'll work together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, On Ping. And just to refresh my memory, the $2 million was ARPA funds, correct?
Let's go back in time. I remember in the last week when David Fleischman was superintendent, he brought forward the strong need from staff and teachers to significantly refresh the K through 5 EL curriculum. Kathy Smith lifted it up again, and then I think Superintendent Nolan was thrilled to have that funding ready to go. with Renee's leadership on the implementation. So that was ARPA funding, which is obviously one-time funding. And just want to make sure people know that I, as mayor, didn't pick the highest priority use for this. The partners at NPS come to me. And again, when we have one-time funds, I certainly look to the important needs in the teaching and learning. And again, working closely with the superintendent when we had free cash funding of approximately $6.2 million that I thought could be put towards the needs of NPS. It was Superintendent Nolan who worked with her team to craft the best uses for it. And she brought forward a variety of school facility needs as well as instructional and curriculum materials. So perhaps Renee gave me, yes, I'm thrilled to take credit for setting aside funding for NPS, but please don't point to me for deciding the use of it. That's Superintendent Nolan and her team.
I do want to say, though, the only reason we could vie for the high quality materials addition of $1 million is that you made that initial match there. So.
Thank you for that clarification. Emily, did you, and then Amy?
First of all, thank you, as always, for your hard work. So I have a comment and a question. My comment is, I'm glad to see that there's additional funding for professional development, and I hope that that trend continues along the way. So that's one. My question is, last year there were, you mentioned some restorations or a restoration in your presentation. And so there were a number of online subscription-based things that I know got cut last year. Is there anything in that bucket or that would be considered for restorations this year? Obviously, if I could wave my magic wand, we'd fully fund everything, but here we are.
There were a couple of online resources that we had to cut last year, one being Newsela and then BrainPop, both that teachers K through 8 use pretty regularly. So we are definitely taking a look at expanding Newsela because right now we are using it in the middle schools only 6 through 8. So we are thinking about expanding that back up to the high school level. BrainPop is on the list for discussion. We have not made final decisions around how we're fully going to spend the $925,000, but it's on the list to be discussed.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Mayor.
And I just want to follow up Emily's desire. I suspect the superintendent would say, yes, we need to increase investments in instructional and curriculum materials and professional development. And it is always lovely to have one-time funds, but growing the ongoing funding for both within the operating budget is very important and something certainly we want to support in the years ahead.
Thank you. Amy, go ahead.
Hi, Renee. You showed us your beautiful website that outlines for families curricular units of study. In terms of social studies and science, as you roll out and pilot new units, has the unit structure remained and the implementation of that unit changed so that if I'm a 5th grade parent next year and I go to that website, is that what my student is going to be learning, or is that a reflection of past practices, or is that like aspirationally what they're learning sometime?
That is an excellent question. So it reflects what is currently happening. And so for next year, when we have the implementation of the grade 5 social studies units, the website will be updated to reflect that, as well as when the science units are rolled out, it will be updated as well. So what you see right now on the website is what is currently happening today.
Okay. And for 5th grade for next year, I think I'd love for you to speak a little bit more about whether or not changes are going to be taking place. I'm particularly mindful that 5th grade is their first real deep dive into U.S. history. it's an election year and there's no longer like a real focus on United States history in eighth grade because of the focus on civics. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what our fifth graders will be learning.
That's a great question. And I don't know the specific details around the updates for the grade 5 rollout for next year. So I would leave that to Alan Ripp to give you those details. But again, Dr. Nolan and I and the rest of the team have to take a look at how we're going to manage the implementation of both EL and those units. And so that is a discussion that we could bring forth at a future date before the end of the year to give more clarity around that.
That would be great. Thank you. My last question is just about the screenings. Are you considering any other screenings besides iReady for math?
We are looking at STAR
I like STAR
as well.
for what it's worth.
It's a lot of money.
I bet because it's so good. Sorry, I'm done now.
That is a biased school committee comment. I'm just saying.
My opinions are my own.
Informed, perhaps.
Thank you, Amy. Tamika, go ahead.
Thank you. So I really appreciate having the timeline that you put together. And I appreciate also the care and consideration that's been embedded into the rollout of how we're going to update and implement new curricula. I think it's something that's come up this year. Obviously, this year was a very challenging year in terms of our ability to implement, the new English language curriculum. And when we're thinking about mapping out on top of that, the social studies and science curriculum and when we're going to improve those things, it's wonderful and it's exciting and it's necessary, but it's also, as you mentioned, it is, there is some impact to our staff in terms of their capacity and not overburdening them with the continual pace. So I think it's wonderful that we're keeping mindful of that balance as we look to do this work over the next several years. And so that's a comment. Another comment is just I just wanted to acknowledge my own appreciation, and I'm sure my colleagues will join me in the appreciation for your work and professionalism. It's just been, as Mayor Fuller alluded to, through 3 superintendents in 3 years, a lot of challenges. In that time, you've done really wonderful job of implementing the EL curriculum and getting us on pace to overhaul the rest of our curriculum as well. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamika. Any other questions from members? I
I will just echo Tamika's thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
I had just a couple quick questions. So one was on the after-school academic support. It's a $110,000 line item. Can you just elaborate a little bit on exactly what that is?
I think I'll defer that to Dr. Nolan.
Where are you seeing that, Chris?
It's under the Budget by Responsibility Center, under Teaching and Learning Program on page 51. And we can come back to that at another time if we don't have an immediate answer there.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a look. Sorry, I'm gonna have to take a peek at what that actually is. And I don't know if Liam, I don't know if you know that, you're sitting right there, what flows into that line item. My sense is it might be a few things.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I think there's a combination of a few things. There may even be some summer programming in this, so let's get back to you, I think would be the best, just to confirm what this might be.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. And then in terms of in that same part of the budget by Responsibility Center, just looking at professional development, roughly 1/3, or I'm sorry, 1/4 of the teaching and learning program budget. How do we how far is that scheduled out? Like, do we at this point in time have the full plan put together for the following year of what that looks like, what we're focusing on? I mean, you touched on it in your presentation a bit, but is there just a little more detail on kind of where the rubber hits the road? with
So,
professional
in
development?
terms of our summer professional development, there is an allocation that is apportioned towards the high schools as well as the K through 8 schools as well. So those particular projects are dependent on whatever the schools are focused on for that particular upcoming year. And so that is a portion, excuse me, of the summer PD. But then we have professional development that happens throughout the course of the year. There are offerings that are free of charge, but then there are stipends that we provide to educators that is grounded in our 5 key areas around culturally responsive instruction, universal design for learning, IT, various topics. And then, of course, we have professional development that is led by our curriculum coordinators that, again, is grounded in our culturally responsive practices, as well as an emphasis on SEI strategies. So it really varies, Chris, but that additional funding that you're noting there is for summer PD.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think that's all I have. Any other questions from members? Yes, Rajiv, go ahead.
Just to clarify, there is a line item for disability education, but I was going to defer my question until student services.
Okay.
Because I think it's actually belongs there, even though it shows up here.
So we did have a conversation about this and Casey is ready to respond to that, but we left it here because we didn't want you to think that we pulled it out. So we left it in the same budget it was in before.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Dr. McCall. And next up, we have student services.
Great. Thank you, Chair. I think you'll probably see my colleagues taking a seat and they'll get started once they're situated. Folks can hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you, Casey.
Great, thank you. So I apologize, unfortunately, that I could not be there with you tonight, but appreciate, of course, the opportunity to present, albeit remotely. You do have before you my colleagues, our department leaders, Maura Tynes, Director of Elementary Special Education, Melissa Gamble, Director of Secondary Special Education, and Kathleen Browning, of course, you all know, Director of NECP, Newton's Early Childhood Program. And then on camera with me also is Shannon Robichaud, who's the Director of our out-of-district programming. So we will present tonight the budget implications for the next school year out of student services. And before I get started, I just want to let the folks know that we're forecasting for the community that we will be providing an update actually on student services along with CPAC when they present our end of year report towards the end of the school year. So stay tuned for that. Next slide, please, Kathleen.
Melissa's doing it.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Melissa. All right, so I'll start tonight's presentation just quickly with an overview of the major departments. Most folks think that student services is special education. Special education certainly falls under the office, but we also have student supports, which includes all supports to all students within Newton Public Schools. This includes mental health supports, guidance, and school counseling, social emotional learning. And then in partnership with elementary education and teaching and learning is multi-tiered systems of support. So I wanted to just remind folks that we are not just special education over here in OSS. Next slide, please. So this here is an overview of all the staffing changes that our office will implement next school year. You'll notice that unlike last year, there are no cuts being made, but rather an additional 22.6 FTEs being added to the student services budget. We've separated them out here to just explain a bit more in terms of how these FTEs are broken out. So for those of you who have not gone through a budgeting cycle or who have gone through a few budgeting cycles or are familiar with special education in particular, you'll know that the budgeting for student services, in particular special ed, is pretty volatile. volatile in the sense that there's a level of unpredictability and certainly the ability to change at any time depending on student needs. We're very lucky to have a team of folks who understand the volatility of budgeting within student services, especially those who have seen the history of revenue that comes in from the state, and then of course the expenditure trends specific to our district. So we have a pretty good idea of the swing, if you will, throughout the year. And for those of you who are not as familiar with budgeting, much of it, as I mentioned, is about special education. There's a lot of movement at any snapshot in time during the year. Because of the individualized nature of special education, changes are happening really every day. We have students who come in with needs that require staffing changes. We have students who are leaving programs or leaving our district. And for those students who are receiving services that require staffing, then that frees up some staffing for us. So we have actually some pretty intricate systems in place that capture all of these micro and macro moments so that when it comes to budget planning time, it actually allows for us to be pretty targeted and strategic about how we budget and where we put our FTEs. An example of this is the expansion of the Reflections program over at Williams. And so what we do is that we look at the students who are aging out, those we know who are moving, those who no longer qualify for special education, and we see who has an FTE attached to that student that we can now redeploy elsewhere without adding to the budget unnecessarily so. This way of budgeting allows us to be pretty precise, actually. I think it's pretty responsible budgeting while also meeting the needs of all the students. To that end, though, we know that we have to prepare for the unknown. So you'll see here in the top row, an estimated need for FTEs for next year is about 10. So we are putting 10 FTEs on hold. So we're holding 10 FTEs for unknown enrollment needs, such as new students moving in with implications for additional staffing. The second row here is what we've been able to add thanks to the stabilization funding. So here you have a total of 10.4 FTE, which includes the addition of the social workers at the elementary level and the additional staffing that's required to continue to operate the newly opened in January NECP classroom. The last row here will actually be discussed in more detail in subsequent slides, but it's a 2.2 FTE add as a result of some of that trading, the sort of horse trading that I discussed earlier. Next slide, please. So we'll go into special education and we'll start with our youngest learners and move our way up. So I will pass it on to Kathleen.
Great, thank you. So the early childhood program now, most of you have been through there or multiple times, so I've always appreciated the visits. We are currently sitting right now at current enrollment of 215 students with 130 students on IEPs. There are many students in the middle of evaluations right now. This is just a few numbers up there. We have 40 in process currently. 154 have been completed to date for all phone calls last week, and 3 students moving in from other districts. So just last week. So they are on their way. For future planning, I always like the information from early intervention. So of the 426 cases at early intervention, so that's Riverside Early Intervention, Birth to 3, which covers Newton, Needham, Weston, and Wellesley. We still can get a few cases from the Thome Early Intervention in Waltham, but not as many. But 211 of those cases reside in Newton. So that's students from 0 all the way to almost 3. So more than or approximately half of their program falls for Newton. And as you know, during the 23-24 school years, just this past January, we opened our 14th classroom. Currently right now for 7 slots, in general 4, almost 5 are enrolled. So I believe I'm a little anxious about the end of the school year, but we'll get there. So this is just a slide of our current numbers, and it goes back for the year, 2 years prior. One of the things I always point out is the number of students who are placed out of district at the preschool level, because it's rare. We are able to have the majority of the students be in our program because we have so many skilled professionals at NECP and throughout obviously the district. So that's one of the things that's really wonderful about NECP. On the top line, I am projecting 180 students this year. So last year was 170. I am projecting 180 given all the evaluations we're in the middle of right now and all of the calls that we're currently receiving. A lot of the calls we're getting right now are parents who are starting to panic about kindergarten and are calling and saying, my school was telling us to call because my child needs an IV. And that's a process that we CP is just the trends that we've been seeing. This is a similar slide to when I was here last November presenting. We are really finding that these are still the students that were born during the pandemic or right after my 2021 students right now are ones that were born just as vaccinations were starting to happen. So these students are just different in their presentation. They are having a harder time being out of their homes, separating from family members. Just this decreased school readiness, more dysregulation is what we're seeing for the little ones right now. And we are really trying to look at the profiles of the students that we have coming in and change our service delivery accordingly based on cohorts and what we're seeing as trends, doing that internally with the resources that we have. One trend that I am seeing right now, which does have me concerned for next year, is we have had a significant number of students who have been enrolled in our STRIDE program. And right now, starting next school year, we have 2 STRIDE classrooms at NECP. Both will have 7 students in them. And Department of Elementary and Secondary Education regulations at the preschool level is a cap of 9. So that only leaves 4 openings in STRIDE for next school year, which is concerning. So that's some of the trend that I am seeing.
I'm happy to talk a little bit about what's happening in elementary school for special education in our 15 schools. So you'll see here, similar to last year's, we've looked at trends over 3 years. And as we look at that, we see that we've got a fair amount of stability with a small uptick 22-23. And right now we're at 787. That may have changed since the date that I made this slide. In fact, I'm positive it did, given meetings happened today and last week. That's that ever-changing volatility that Casey mentioned. And when we made the slide, there were 103 students under evaluation at that time. So you might know that once a parent consents to an evaluation, we have 45 days to complete that evaluation. And so we were in that 45-day window for 103 students at that time. For students placed out of district at the elementary level, that's fairly stable over a number of years, including these 3 years. And although we see a lot of complexity with students, we have been able to support them in district and value students who are able to remain in district. So to be responsive to the needs for all learners at the elementary level, we spend end of winter, beginning of spring, doing a look at each of the elementary schools, talking with principals and teams about what staffing patterns would be most supportive of their building for the following year. And we are, our goal for that is to ensure that students are supported and that we have the right staff in place. Part of that review is looking at citywide programs, not just the elementary school neighborhood students that are enrolled based on their address. And we have, in my partnership with Kathleen, I know that there are a number of students leaving NECP, moving their way up to kindergarten, which is very exciting, but they need the level of support that Reflections offers. So we have a pretty good cohort moving up. And so we will need to expand the Reflections program at Williams, which we're excited to be able to do and to welcome those families into in-district supported programming. With that, we have, in my partnership with Melissa, we know that there are a number of 5th graders moving up to middle school in the STRIDE program. It's fewer than the incoming K students that are coming, and that's allowed us to drop one of the classrooms at Bowen. So we'll have just one remaining classroom at Bowen because our cohorts are not balanced between incoming K and outgoing 5th grade. That's again, just using our staffing appropriately. I also have the great fortune of spending a lot of time talking about buildings, which is very exciting, in partnership with some of our friends at City Hall, Josh Morse and Company. We meet very often, Emily knows, around all these school builds. And so we have a couple of citywide programs that will be able to move into really lovely, appropriate spaces for them moving forward. So as we plan for a new Franklin school, we will be moving the bridge program from Pierce to Franklin with newly designed spaces. The Spark program already is at Countryside and will remain there again with space that we've been able to customize for them. And then at the Lincoln Elliott School, when they are opening up, which is earlier, the earliest open, we will have the REACH program. And for people who have been here a while might remember the REACH program, but I can explain. It's a program that we discontinued for a period of time because of space issues, but now that we'll have space, Lincoln Elliott will have REACH, which supports students with language-based learning disabilities. There's, of course, the Horace Mann Elementary School, who's not receiving a citywide program, but also I participate on all of those meetings with architects, and we will have appropriate spaces for students with disabilities in that school as well that reside in the neighborhood. That's a really enjoyable part of our work together.
So at the secondary and post-secondary level, we're looking at the middle school numbers at the top, and as you will see, they have remained mostly consistent over time. There was a drop going into the 22-23 school year, and then right now it's settling in at 478. There are still kids who are being evaluated as we speak in all 4 of the middle schools, but it has remained stable. At the high school, we've seen a slight uptick over the years, from 660 in the 21-22 school year to 726 in the 22-23 school year to 735 so far this year. Still kids being evaluated as we speak. The number will go up some. If you look at our out-of-district numbers, the middle school has remained pretty consistent. We're down a little bit from last year, which is good because we were up a little bit last year from the 21-22 school year. And right now, the numbers for the high school out-of-district are down slightly. I expect that they'll be about the same that they were last year. So a lot of the decisions I have made with Casey and with the rest of the directors is preparing for students moving into some of our programs. Specifically at Oak Hill, they have the language-based program A cohort and B cohort. That will be increasing next year. It'll be somewhere in the mid 40s, if not higher. They're still doing transition meetings right now, and we don't know where the final number will end. Brown Middle School, as Maura spoke about, we have a cohort of 5th grades coming up, which will increase the program from 13 to about 18. So we would like an increase in the special ed teacher that is currently there. And then with all of that, with more kids going into programs, there is a need to increase just slightly our some of our related services for OT and PT in order to support the kids specifically at the middle school. And then finally, there's an increase for a school psychologist at Newton South. They currently have 2.2. This would increase them to a 3.0. Again, looking at the programs and the kids moving up, this is all based on the enrollment and the number of students that will be coming to Newton South, going there next year. That's it.
Thank you all. I just want you to know it's a superintendent's dream to have this team trying to rebudget with you every year because they are looking for the most creative, most efficient, cost-effective ways to serve our kids and to do so without compromising student experience. And that's what you want to do. So thank you all for, I know the hours that goes into it, but I do admire the creativity of the ways you have come up with the things that we need.
Okay, thank you. With that, let's go to questions. Barry?
Hi, just a new guy question. Is there somewhere I can see what each special program is, like Stride and Reach? I'm familiar with some of them, but not all of them.
Sure. On the website, there's a link on the Student Services website,
Okay.
and there's a guide actually to both. It starts out with philosophy, and then it moves into citywide programs by level, so you can read about
Cool.
each one. Yeah.
Also, thank you for everything.
I'll email you the link, Barry.
Okay, thanks.
Emily.
Other questions? Rajiv?
Starting with NECP, if we do need an additional Stride classroom, how much of the 10 FTEs in reserve would that require?
A little bit more of a question for Casey. I think I'm hoping similar to this year when we had to open one in January, so I had to come here in November. It's not something we're going to need right at the beginning of the school year. And of course, the little 3-year-olds, we don't even know who they are yet.
Right.
So it could be something that we sit steady at 7 in each classroom all year, and I don't have to come here and ask. But historically, that has shown that hasn't been the case. But we just don't know in regards to that. As far as the FTE part of it, a Stride classroom does require the teacher, obviously related service professionals, and the behavior therapists.
Right.
So it's not an inexpensive thing to open. It would also not have to, my current Stride classrooms are a head teacher and 7 behavior therapists because they can go up to 9 students. It wouldn't start with that many behavior therapists to start out, of course.
Okay, no, thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate the kind of reserve of 10 FTEs, right? And I'm just trying to get a sense of across all the levels, is that enough? Thanks.
If I could just add to what Kathleen said to address some parts of Rajiv's question, at any given point in time, it's not just 10 FTEs. There are times when we're not hired, and so we have more FTEs. There are times when, a student is moving out, and if that student, let's say, had a one-to-one aide, it's 11 FTEs. So it doesn't sit at 10. It's actually more than that in any given day. So we do have some flexibility there.
Ogun?
For now.
Okay. Anping?
Thank you. Special education is always a difficult topic for me, at least. Many reasons. And the budget probably one of them. And, in community, when you're talking to people, sometimes you still hear, oh, it's very costly. And, when I first learned about this topic, I also had the same feeling, from 20% of special needs students, I think past few years dropped to 18%, right? Around that. Now there's a little bit increase, and I'm happy to see we have 2.1 FTE increase in terms of a special education teacher and a psychologist and occupational therapist. I'm looking at the secondary, post-secondary IEP counts. And those numbers, last year, I think probably I asked similar question. Looking at the number of students on IEP, and there's interesting trends here. Middle school seems the overall special education students dropped from 21 to 22, 512, then to 22 to 23, 490, and 23 to 24, 478, consistently decreasing. And meanwhile, the high school IEP, students on IEP, from 660 to 726 to 735 seem, kind of consistently increasing. So I'm just wondering, anything you guys can help us to understand why that trend, because COVID or because some other factors? And I know that high school students have a lot of social emotional challenges during the past few years. That's common knowledge, but there might be other things going on. And quickly, I'd like to say that the number of students placed out of district which is really expensive. We all know that, and seems a little bit decreasing. But also, I happened to heard one family when we had a PTO meeting, one Asian parent talked to me very extensively. Sounds like he had a complaint. He said, well, school probably shut out money. That's why I had to fight the school to get my kid outplaced. And I questioned his assumption, but of course, I don't have all the data. And it's a lot of, personal information. I could not ask too much, but I did that question lingering in my mind. So I just take this opportunity to ask you guys a few questions to educate me and probably for the people who are listening who might have the same kind of concern or inquiries. Thanks.
I think if you're talking about the increase going from middle to high school, it's a couple of different things. There is a bubble of enrollment where it's a little bit bigger at the high school right now. The bubble moved through the middle school and now is up at the high school. That is part of the reason the high school numbers are a little bit higher and the middle school numbers have dipped. I do also think the social emotional needs of students at the high school have been something that both high schools have been grappling with, which has more students have become eligible in that category, and there's more kids with complex needs as well. So I think it's a combination of a little bit of COVID still that we're managing and the effects on social media on students too. I think we can't, speak enough about as playing a role so on the social emotional needs of students. And, COVID just played a part in that and the enrollment patterns that we've seen too.
Thank you. In terms of, I don't know if that, Casey, to you, that question. Casey, to you, that question in terms of our district placement. Anything you can share with me or with our colleagues? And Newton's doing better job. We have more programs to take care of those kids rather than, sending out. I think, it probably is good to share with the community. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Anping. Certainly, our out-of-district numbers are something that I'm pretty proud of. I think it's a testament to our in-district programming that we offer. When you look at specifically at the different types of schools that some districts pay for in terms of out-of-district programming, you'll see that it runs the gamut. And there are schools that educate different profiles. However, if you look at the number or the schools that our students that are Newton students going out of district, there really is only a couple of profiles. And these are the profiles that we have found it a little bit more difficult to educate in district. And so I will actually let Shannon Robichaud speak a little bit more about the trends that she's been seeing. And our numbers have been pretty stable. Aside from the 14% jump that we had no control over, the rest of our numbers have remained stable, which is pretty impressive, especially given what Melissa just described too, with the impacts from COVID.
Thank you, Casey. I'm happy to jump in and just speak a bit to the trends. I think we are noticing a lot of anxiety and social emotional needs as a result of COVID and what occurred there. I think the trends we're seeing this year, we have a variety of populations, but the majority are students with a primary disability category of social emotional and a primary disability category of autism spectrum disorder. With that being said, the majority of our students with autism are also facing high anxiety and social emotional needs as well. So even, it's not just related to their disability category, but how things are impacting them and how they're able to manage and cope with that as a result of their disability. I think when we're thinking about students who are being placed out, one of the things we're looking at is their disability so severe and in need that they can't be managed and supported in a general education classroom, because when you're being placed out, it does require the removal from the general ed setting. And we're always looking at ways to support students in the least restrictive setting. So although, it probably feels very overwhelming and a fight, Newton does have significant amount of in-district programming. Just to make a quick note, when I started in 2011, we had 185 students placed in out-of-district programs, and now we're down to about approximately 115. And that is because of the programs that we have built in district. We get phone calls from other districts all the time, looking to place students here as well, just because of, the programs that we have, and the ability that we are able to meet students' needs in district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Other questions? Mayor Fuller, then Emily.
Couple questions. A year ago, we were reeling from the 14% increase that the state provided justifiably on out-of-district tuitions. What's the increase for next year that the state is telling us about? It's question one. I have a couple others.
I think I can answer that, folks. I think it's 4.7% is the OSD rate increase, Mayor.
Thank you. There's a lot of attention in the everywhere on cell phones and social and emotional impacts, which is cell phones and social media kind of go together, but they're also different. I know we've done a pilot this year, I believe at Day, with locking them up. How are all of you thinking about that at other middle schools and or high schools?
So we'll be bringing you a presentation in May or June, actually, on the pilots that have happened here. I mean, I think there's a lot of agreement that we would like to do it. The Day program may be cost prohibitive, but there are other ways to address it. We definitely are going to need to have a community-wide discussion about how we're going to do this. If parents are not supportive, it won't work. So I think there's a lot of energy towards helping our students with this.
And one more question, if I may. How are you doing finding the specialized staff that we need? How's it going?
That does sometimes prove to be a challenge, but it's something that we work with human resources on and supporting us to find candidates. We'll start, I hope, early, looking this year with the eye toward hopefully hiring on the earlier side. I think that's our best bet to bring people in. And the idea that Newton is a desirable school district to work in, I think works in our favor, but it's not without challenge.
I think Maura's being really nice. It's been pretty difficult, I have to say. We have had to sign on with not just one, but I think 3 staffing agencies in order to fill some of our positions right now. It's not something we want to do. We want to be able to obviously hire folks so that they can be truly a part of the school community. But instead right now, we do have contractors coming in to provide speech services. We haven't had much luck finding school psychologists. So we actually have been paying at a per diem rate our own school psychologists who do have the time and capacity and willingness, of course, to complete some evaluations. You saw the number that Maura put out there, 103 kids on that one day. Going through evaluations is a lot, and that includes NECP too. It's been difficult to find folks, OTs as well, speech, psychologist. I think actually BCBAs are difficult as well. I did hear from Jesse Krodik earlier today that we are getting already some resumes for the social work positions at the elementary level, which is great, but still not at the rate that we were looking at pre-COVID.
Okay, thank you. Emily?
Hello. Hi. Again, thank you for your presentation and always the data that accompanies it. I have 2 questions. One has to do with NECP, and I feel like I asked this question last year and probably the year before about the EI sort of bubble bump, and I feel like we're kind of in the midst of a perpetual bubble bump, which is, it is what it is. So my question is, and I can't believe I'm actually asking this, do you anticipate, I know it's totally volatile and we have no idea what's actually going to happen, but I'm mildly worried about whether or not we're going to max out the available classroom space in an ECP. Is that even remotely a possibility, given the numbers that you have been hearing and seeing?
I mean, historically, we've always opened a new classroom at NECP every 3, 4, 5 years, depending. There's 3 empty classrooms in there right now, although when I say empty, they are being utilized. When we have to actually put a classroom in one of those, a true classroom in one of those spaces that people are currently using, that's going to be a bit of a shift. I don't know about this Stride situation. Obviously, I won't for a little while. My hope was that with having 3 empty classrooms in there, this would be a 10-year type plan, figuring, a new class every 3 years or so. And I came here last November asking for another classroom. Josh Morris joked with me during the renovation that I would be coming to him soon looking for an addition on the front lawn. I kind of said to Josh, maybe the person that comes after me would be the hope. But so I don't know. From the early intervention numbers perspective, that's their number from anybody who's from birth all the way to currently 3. As we know, that's a fluid number because some of the students that are with them, they do not continue to find them eligible as time goes on because their speech has come in or what have you. And then there's other students that show up at about 2 who are not part of those current numbers because their pediatrician sends them TI because they're not speaking. Usually, and I'd have to double check my numbers, I want to say last year we had 69 referrals, I believe, from early intervention, and we're at about that number now. I'm starting to get the fall students right now, summer and fall, because we have to do the evaluations on the students whose birthdays are June, July, August, and September before the end of the school year so that they're ready to go. And then depending on who the child is, October, I can sometimes wait until September. And sometimes we have to do it as well if they're more complex and there's a lot to kind of figure out for that student. So in full, I don't know. But it is worrisome to me that I've already asked for 1 integrated classroom and now I'm worried about my Stride numbers for next year.
Thank you. I have a second question, which has to do with the ESY line item that's in the budget, which is, pretty stable from what it was last year. And I guess my question is, how much volatility is there in that? I know probably at this point, or at least in the next month, like you'll know everything and it's been set. But is there any wiggle room that's needed, or like you have what you need?
We actually have a pretty good handle right now on what we need. We work with teams starting in October to plan for ESY. So we have numbers of students. We've had conversations with all families whose children qualify for extended school year, and all families have already been notified. We're waiting for responses from families. That's the trick. Families may have accepted an IEP saying, yes, we agree with extended school year services, but we haven't heard back from them that they're actually coming to us. They might be vacationing, they might be going to camp or declining. So we know which students need extended school year. Both Melissa and I work with our teams, as does Kathleen. It's a matter of how many children will be attending.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Tamika, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. Excuse me. So, thank you very much, all of you, Casey, you and your team, for giving us a budget in your this area of the budget that isn't thoroughly depressing. For the past few years, we've had many thoroughly depressing budgets. And so I'm happy to say, report and see that this isn't one. This is one that does reflect that the strength of our programs is really is excellent, and that we are prioritizing our values and making sure that investing in our students and what they need. To that vein, something else we've talked about and we've been very excited as a committee to see is that thinking about our next budget cycles and keeping our mindset open to dreaming big and envisioning and sharing that vision out to our community so that our community can come along with us. So one of the things that I'm hoping to see as we're doing this process, as you're doing this process and bringing your recommendations back, is certainly some of the things that I've spoken to with Casey and with Maura, where we're looking at having same cohort pathways for some of our programs, where we have from elementary to middle to high school, we have this continuum of cohort that you're moving on and staying with your classmates. And that's been some of the things that we haven't been able to guarantee. And I know we're very good at ensuring that we are providing students with the least restrictive environments, but at the same time, it would be wonderful to be able to say least restrictive environment and least disruptive to their social and emotional health as well, in terms of their moving on with their classmates. So as you do this process, just want to make sure that we're welcoming of that type of visioning with you, because it would be wonderful that we can start building towards that as a goal.
Thank you. And this is something we talk about frequently as a student services team.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Rajiv, go ahead. Or do you mind if I go, since I had a couple, you've already asked one, so. So I'm going to stay on brand and I have a couple numbers I just want to clarify. What you're showing in the decline in IEP counts, I know has you touched on this as sort of the pending number, so when we compare that to the 836 and 859 over the last 2 years, are those point in time numbers that would have less pending, like an end of the year number? How should we think about that just for comparison purposes? Just, I want to make sure I understood what you were saying there.
So the 21-22 and 22-23 school years are end of year numbers. And then the current year, those are as of the date listed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I presume at the end of the year, there's very little pending. Yeah.
Very little pending. The only reason there'd be anything pending is if we recommended an initial IEP and the meeting was in June and the family hadn't consented yet. So that might change over the summer. That would be the only reason.
Okay, I just wanted to be very clear. So, I mean, a comparable number could very well be something looking very similar when we get to the end of the year. I just wanted to make sure that point was clear. And then that actually answers my next question, which well, let me one other point. So just assuming, that number is going to, I guess, there's no way of knowing, but it's going to be something larger than it is today. I think that's in light of, I was just looking, I think enrollment in elementary has declined something like 3% over the last 2 years. So it's representative of a higher percentage of the student population. And then the second question I had was on the number of aides and aid specialists is increasing. And I was trying to think about that in context of reflective of student population, which, let's say is probably something a little more constant, was increasing at secondary. How much of that is student population? How much of that is just complexity of needs? If just weighing those two variables.
So for the elementary level, I would say it's complexity of need.
It's the same at secondary as well.
Yep.
We are trying to prepare students to go on to that next step, the post-secondary step, whatever that happens to be. So the high schools do have an eye on trying to gain skills for that student, that they're independent skills, so that they don't need an adult by them and they're able to access services outside of the high school when they graduate.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the citywide programs, and I apologize if this is in here, I didn't think it was, but do we publish what the actual enrollment numbers are in those programs? Okay, just for the future, that might be something I'd be interested in seeing, and just seeing how you know, each one of those programs and how,
Yeah, size of program, we could easily do that.
yeah. And I mean, I want to think about that both in context of just, you know, both in terms of need and how that's changing over time and making sure we have staff and facilities and everything else. But also, you know, as we've discussed a number of times over the last couple of years and a bit tonight, you know, it has a serious budgetary impact, but it has a serious, you know, savings of not having to send those kids out of district in many cases. So that would be helpful to see for, you know, maybe next time we're all together.
So how the program size and has changed over time.
Yeah, for
Okay.
each one of the individual programs, just kind of,
Mhm.
you know, what enrollment at a program level looks like through time.
Chris, if I can just add, because you bring up a good point. When we have new building projects, one of the things we do is think about what's the need in terms of profile that's growing that we want to either expand on, like Stride or Spark, or maybe a population that we're seeing growing in the last few years. And one of them is Reach, which Maura talked about, Melissa alluded to it too. So we have Achieve over at Ainger, which is for students with a dyslexia profile. We also have at Oak Hill a program for what's typically called Cohort B, which is students who have a language-based learning disorder, but they also have some communication impairments too, and a slightly different profile, but nuanced enough where they need a different kind of program. And so Reach is that program that we are seeing is missing right now in our district. We're doing our best, but it's not the most efficient way because these students can't be cohorted. So right now they're across the city, and we are, again, doing our best with the staffing that we have, but to have a targeted program like Reach at Lincoln Elliott will be huge for us. So we do look at what's actually happening now in terms of thinking about programming.
Great, thank you. I think that was all I had. Rajiv?
I had one
Oh,
comment.
sorry, Amy, please go ahead.
Sorry. I do just want to also say that in addition to incurring savings for the district and really supporting a diverse range of student needs, the other really amazing benefit of having so many strong internal programs is that every student gets to be exposed to different kinds of learning. And so I don't want to understate that inclusion and even specialized programming are really, really good for all students and not just good for those students. And that's really important, I think, for the district's vision for student success. So thank you for that.
We agree. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Rajiv?
Three hopefully fairly brief questions. So one is about the REACH program. Lincoln Elliott will not be completed really for this budget cycle, but is the assumption that it will be once it's ready, REACH will be a brand new classroom, and we'll need to staff it up appropriately when the new building opens?
Yeah, so the way the building has been designed, it's ready to support Reach students being moved over to Lincoln Elliott, and we will obviously stage that in an appropriate way, meaning we won't move fifth graders necessarily. So what we have set aside is the second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade podded classrooms will have a half-size classroom associated with that group, and a special educator will use that as their home base for pull-out instruction in the academic areas. So this, as Casey mentioned, is a language-based program which is separate and different from the Achieve program, which already exists at Ainger. And the spaces we have designed, and I'm really quite excited about, that reopening, because we have historically had Reach a number of years ago. It's probably been 8 or 10 years since it's been open. And so we will need to staff that appropriately. We have forecasted that with Liam and Sean and his team.
Excellent. But that'll be in the next budget cycle.
Yes, that will be another year. We have some professional development planned for that building, again, without the program there and without special educators there, because it is a benefit for everyone on the faculty. So they will be getting some PD specific to this learning profile even before students arrive.
Thank you. Question for Liam. We talked about NECP and then the elementary school work. is there anything planned in terms of the facilities for students who are based out of the Ed Center? And I admit to a bias there, but are we thinking of any improvements to the annex or for Central High or other locations or other programs?
Yeah, thanks, Rajiv. So we don't have anything significant, I would say. I think you may be aware Central High School, the kind of the first floor, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, we had a pretty big investment down there. Certainly the annex spaces themselves, and then kind of on the third floor as well. I think we could take a look at that. They've had over time some modifications, some kitchen work, cabinetry work, trying to make the spaces a little bit better. But Rajiv, to answer your question directly, we don't have a specific or a real dedicated dollar amount going to improve those spaces significantly. If there's some small work that we could do, we're certainly open to that, and can talk to the folks here. Some of the initiatives we got this year, we're just trying to make sure that the building was secure. So we put some security cameras on the outside of the building, and making sure that the staff and students feel safe.
Okay, thank you. It's possibly a matter of sprucing up.
Yeah.
The annex certainly is like a college dorm room in some ways, and that's probably not ideal, but it works. The staff does a great job there, but it could probably benefit from some paint and a little bit of maintenance.
Okay. Yeah, we could look at that. Something like that could be something we could look at the summer project to take a look at and see if we could get something like that done.
Thank you. And Casey, final question for you. So we were able to get additional social workers, which is fantastic, right? We if we are looking at adjustments, or if some additional funding magically shows up and we're continuing to look for funding, would adding even more social workers or support for social emotional challenges be high on your list? Or do you think we, with what's already in the budget, are in a reasonable place right now?
I do think we are in a reasonable place. However, if there is additional funding, I would look to spending it at the secondary level, shoring up some of our social emotional supports there. Currently, neither of our high schools have a program for students who are either transitioning out of hospitalizations, who aren't quite yet ready for the big building, or those who are awaiting hospitalization, awaiting space. And again, big building is not quite ready for them. So that's where I would look to, is building out some supports and structures within our 2 high schools for something like that. Does that answer your question, Rajiv?
It does. Is what you're referring to something like the Harbor program?
More like the BRIGHT program. The acronym is BRYT. Brookline Mental Health Center operates a number of these in a lot of high schools. And a lot of high schools have their own too, and some have extended them down to the middle school also. So you usually have clinicians attached to this program. You have some teachers attached to it. It's a general education program. Certainly students who are receiving special education can access as well, but it really is to address the growing number of students who are currently in transition, either in or out, and we're seeing an increase in those. But as you can imagine, those programs are costly because you're building almost not a school within a school, but essentially another program, a milieu within the school building.
Got it. Thank you.
I have your last question here, Rajiv, if you don't have any others in terms of the disability inclusion education funding that was reserved for us this year.
Yes, yeah, so I actually thought we had it for 1 year, which was last year. So I see that it continued for this year. So I just was wondering what the focus for it was going to be.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to both this past year and what we're thinking for next year as the work continues. Ideally, we would have spent it paying teachers essentially to help us develop this curriculum. Unfortunately, we were not able to recruit teachers as we had wanted over the summer, and certainly the first half of the school year. So some of it is still reserved for teachers to help develop and review the curriculum, but also for those who may be interested in piloting the curriculum later this spring. We've certainly talked about that. We've also have some funding, using the funding to pay our academic researchers and experts who have been reviewing our curriculum for evidence-based practices. So each of those experts have also been paid. We also have set aside some money to purchase the materials as part of the curriculum. So books, signage, different tactile materials as we roll out the curriculum. So much of it is dog-eared right now, but certainly there are plans for the funding.
So I just wanted to answer the questions that were asked last time that we didn't have the real-time data for. And Liam Hurley, crackerjack that he is, got me the numbers of what that $110,000 tutoring line is. So here it is. That is MCAS after-school tutoring. They are hourly timesheets for middle school predominantly. That's 4 middle schools times 3 subject areas, so math, ELA, and science. And so that's for all 4 schools. So that's that. From last week, you had a question about Title I funding. And the question asked was, you know, what is the status of the title grants for Newton Public Schools? So there was a primary census change between FY24 and 25. So we only get preliminary projections right now. They are confirmed in the summer. So I'll give you the teaser told us that our funding may drop 6.89%. So with FY24 funding being $469,000, a 6.89 drop would translate to a decrease of 32.3K. However, Amy, our grants lead, has projected a programming impact of 60K, as we would need to also absorb the increase of the STEPS, lanes, COLA, and healthcare that are taken from that grant. So because all of our Title I funding provides for supplemental, dedicated Title I staff, even flat funding creates an operational shortfall when annual compensation increases in the contract. So that was one of the questions. And the other question was that you all asked about class sizes at the high school. All the subjects that were 25, how many classes were 25 or greater number of students? So I'll give it to you in straight numbers and a percentage. There are 5 subject areas without electives right now. The number of sections with 25 or more students at North is 149. This is up from last year, which was 132. And South is 148, up from last year, which was 100. Percentage-wise, that is North, 34% of classes are in that number. Last year, it was 30. South, so the percentage of these sections, so is 34% at North. Last year, it was 30. And at South, it's 39%. So last year, 25%. Hence the recommendation to use the ed stabilization funding for those reductions in class sizes. So those are the outstanding questions from last time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other question? Yep, Anping?
And can I ask, clarify, so 34 at North and 39 at South of the classes with 25 or more
Correct.
students for elective courses?
No, for all courses.
For all courses,
Mhm.
okay, thank you.
See, the link between electives and class sizes overall is, let's say I'm a math teacher, which would be hysterical, but so if I teach 3 sections of freshman algebra, let's say, and then I might teach one other section of an elective. So or I might teach 2 sections of electives and 2 of a base course. So what happens is when we made those budget cuts, it not only cuts the gen ed regular algebra class, it also cuts any other electives that person may teach. So it creates higher class sizes in the base program and no other options for the students. And that's why we've had unfilled classes for kids, like unfilled schedule, and higher class sizes.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Casey, Shannon, Melissa, Maura, and Kathleen. And thank you for hosting city councilors at the NECP last week. I think that was, we've heard from a number of them. It was a super helpful experience.
Oh,
So
it's
I
wonderful.
appreciate that.
Yeah, anytime, it was great.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Casey.
We have two further agenda items this evening. First is an introduction of our Student Opportunity Act plan. Oh, and that was actually, sorry, that's moved to Wednesday. So we don't have that.
Right.
And finally, we have a discussion and vote on the NISA Memorandum of Understanding or Agreement, I guess, technically.
And here she is, the closer, Jill. Very Grady, our general counsel.
If somebody from the actual negotiating committee wanted to present this, come on, Rajiv.
Sit with you? Do you want somebody to sit with you? I joined
Sure.
one session.
I know, yeah. Yeah. As you all know, we were negotiating with all the unions over the last almost 2 years, I would say. And NISA is the secretaries, Newton Educational Secretaries Association. After we were able to settle the contract with the NTA, we were luckily able to settle the contract also with NISA in a pretty short order within the bounds that actual MOU has been shared with the committee, and it's posted with the materials. And it was, I think, a somewhat of a pleasant experience. We always enjoy working with them. And we were able to settle it within the financial bounds that the subcommittee had been given, and comparably with the NTA. So you can see it set forth. I mean, I think the highlights are the COLAs, which were the same COLAs that the NTA also received. They agreed to the healthcare concessions that the NTA agreed to. Some of the parental leave, new parental leave benefit, although it wasn't asked for by NISA, it was offered and extended to them after that became part of the agreement with the NTA. And there's a couple of other small things, more operational than other, about ways to support the NISA staff and let them know how valued they are. Some of it being some good professional development language that Joanne put forth with some thought. There was a little bump in some other financial areas, but not a lot. Am I hitting all the high notes? Am I missing anything big? I'm just going to let Rajiv and Tamika talk about it. I know you all have to discuss and vote on it, but the document fairly speaks for itself.
I think you hit the highlights, and we tweaked the longevity numbers, the bonuses that are paid, but again within the bounds of what had been discussed and proposed. I think what worked out well here is actually some of the working conditions changes. So not directly financial, but I think the benefits we're seeing, for instance, with approval from the building principal, allowing NISA members to work from home during school vacation weeks as possible, I think is good for working conditions, good for morale. So that was something I think that worked out well. Putting consistency between NISA and the NTA contracts, I think was also good. As Jill said, we offered the changes to parental leave, for instance, that weren't necessarily asked for, but that I think creates a good high floor for of our employees. And I know there's one other thing
Step dates.
the step dates.
We did
yes.
equalize the step dates to be equitable with NTA. It also, I think, logistically makes sense as well for our payroll and HR folks as well, which I think was important. They actually they settled before the NTA the last go round, so they hadn't moved their step dates up at all. So they were still in March, I believe. So we graduated that, but more aggressively so that they'll be on the same schedule as the NTA going forward, which will then bring everybody to September, or everyone in NISA and the NTA to September at the end of this contract, which is September 2027.
And I think the only other thing to, and I'm not even going to say add because Jill said it, but to underscore is that working with the NISA bargaining team was it was a model of the collaborative partnership that these negotiations can be, are, should be. We've been sitting down with these folks since October of last year and really working through making sure that we were arriving at some mutually beneficial terms, problem solving for the district and for the NISA members. And it was a good process.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing too. I'd be remiss, as you all know, Sean is always the magic man behind the curtain, but also Caitlin Lewis really did a bulk of this work. She does a lot of HR and she's been here longer. And Joanne certainly stepped in, but really it was Caitlin who did all the a lot of the work in terms of figuring out the language and what works and what doesn't. So I wanted to make sure that she was properly acknowledged for all the work that she put in. And yourself, of course.
Yes, thank you, Jill.
And organizer.
Kathy Shields.
And Kathy Shields, let's not forget her.
Yes.
Just one last thing. We should bring Amy in as the final kind of attendee of every session because she was the closer. She attended one meeting.
That was it.
And that was all that it took.
Yeah. She came in and they
Much
sounded on the
appreciated.
dotted line.
That's right.
Okay, I'm not making any jokes there.
Please.
Everyone's had the chance to review the agreement. We did offer an executive session if we felt there needed to be for further discussion, and no one felt that was necessary. I thought it was pretty straightforward myself. So, does any members have any other questions for negotiating team or Jill? Okay. With that, is there a motion to approve the NISA contract?
I defer. Go ahead.
No, we were,
All right. We will not debate
Somebody
that
make the
point.
motion.
We won't debate that point. I move to for us to approve the NISA Newton Educational Secretaries Association memorandum agreement for the I'm going to flub the years. Why should I even bother?
well, there are two, right? There's the 1 year.
One a year and a 3-year contract. And if we're going to have to vote to correct that, we should just correct it now.
Yes.
So 1 year from September 1st, 2023 through August 31st of 2024. And then the 3-year begins this upcoming September 1st, 2024 to August 31st, 2027.
Exactly. So that's the motion.
All right, so the language is, just to be clear, approving the memorandum agreement between Newton Educational Secretary Association and Newton School Committee for the dates that we just set for. Okay, perfect. Is there a second to that?
I second.
Moved by Tamika, second by Rajiv. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, with that, we'll take a roll call vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2? Yes, that's me, sorry. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5? Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8?
Yes.
And Ward 9.
Yes.
And that is 9-0. Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the negotiating team for all the hard work. And Jill, yourself, and as you said, to Joannie and Sean and Caitlin, everyone behind that. So, one more to go with the
Hopefully we'll be back
custodians,
here soon.
and hopefully we'll wrap that up soon, and we can not negotiate for some time. With that, I believe that concludes our agenda for this evening, and we are adjourned.
Take your phone.